What if your biggest failure wasn't a mistake, but the exact path God allowed you to take in order to shape you and position you for what's next? That's a hard truth to swallow, especially when you're standing in the wreckage of something you thought would succeed. Maybe it was a business deal that fell apart. Maybe it was a leadership decision that backfired. Maybe it was a promise you broke and can't take back. Failure stings because it exposes us. It reminds us, guess what? We're not in control. And if we're honest, most of us would rather skip the fire and get straight to the victory. But God doesn't waste failure. He uses it. He uses it to burn away pride, to refine our motives, and to deepen our dependence on Him. Failure isn't God's punishment. It's His process. And if you'll stay in the fire instead of running from it, you might find that what felt like an ending was actually the beginning of God's best work. In fact, the Bible is filled with stories of men who failed, not because God wanted to shame them, but because failure is often a necessary part of formation. 1 Peter 1, 6-7 says, "Now for a little while you may have to suffer grief in all kinds of trials. These have come so that your faith, of greater worth than gold, may be proved genuine and results in praise, glory, and honor when Jesus Christ is revealed." Notice that it doesn't say, you probably won't suffer grief, or if you suffer grief, that means something is wrong. Rather, it says you may have to suffer grief so that your faith may be proved genuine. God doesn't waste your pain. He uses it to purify your faith. And then there's James 1, 2-4, which says, "Consider it pure joy when you face trials of many kinds, because the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, lacking nothing." We don't like that verse, but it's true. God uses testing, struggle, and even failure to grow us up. And finally, Romans 8:28, the promise every believer needs to cling to. And we know that in all things, God works for the good of those who love Him. All things. That includes the failures we caused ourselves. When we put all that together, you see a pattern. God often uses failure to teach us. And it doesn't mean something is wrong, because in success, we tend to rely on ourselves. In failure, we're forced to rely on Him. You see, when everything is going well, you can convince yourself you're in control. But when it all falls apart, you find out what your faith is really built on. Spiritually, failure strips away pride and self-reliance. It reminds you that you were never the source of your strength. God was, and He still is. Personally, failure tests where your identity rests. So many men wrap their worth around their performance. When things fall apart, they feel worthless. But God uses failure to separate who you are from what you achieve. Relationally, failure softens you. It makes you more patient with your wife, more understanding with your kids, more compassionate towards others. When you failed, you stop pretending to be the hero and start pointing to the real one, Jesus. And legacy-wise, how you respond to failure will shape your children's faith so much more than your success ever could. Your kids might be impressed by your wins, but they'll be transformed by how you handle your losses. So let's get practical. Here are 5 ways to let failure become God's refining fire in your life. Number 1, name it honestly. Don't hide or deny it. While it's tempting to hide your failures to protect your pride, this ultimately gives shame, the upper hand. So be honest. Say it out loud. Write it down. Talk about it with God and with someone you trust. Confession isn't about humiliation. It's about freedom. Scripture says the truth will set you free. That includes telling the truth about, where you fell short. God's love doesn't fluctuate with your performance. You don't lose your identity, when you lose a battle. You can experience failure without being a failure. Number 2, ask God, what do you want me to learn from this? While failure is sometimes an inevitable part of life and learning, sometimes it's God's way of getting our attention. This is why it can be helpful whenever you experience a failure to ask, God, is there something you want me to learn through this? Chances are there is. Maybe He's burning away pride. Maybe He's teaching you to let go of control. Maybe He's exposing, fear or impatience. Whatever it is, don't waste the lesson. Number 3, reframe failure as formation. We often think failure means we're off. We often think failure means we're off course. But this isn't always the case. One failure now doesn't have to throw us off track forever. Think about the greats of Scripture. Moses killed a man and ran into the desert for 40 years before God called him back to lead his people. Peter denied Jesus 3 times and became the rock that the early church was built on. David fell hard, but God still called him a man after his own heart. Their failure didn't end their story. It shaped it. God uses failure like a sculptor uses a chisel. It's painful, but every strike is purposeful. Every blow is removing what doesn't belong so he can reveal what does. So don't despise the refining fire. Embrace it. Number 4, lean into community, not isolation. When failure hits, the natural instinct is to withdraw. You feel embarrassed and maybe ashamed. You don't want people to see the cracks. But isolation is where shame grows. God designed brotherhood for this exact reason. Proverbs says, as iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens another. You can't be sharpened alone. Tell a trusted brother what happened. Ask for prayer. Let people walk with you. When you bring your failure into the light, it loses its power to define you. Number 5, keep moving forward in faith. Failure's loudest lie is, it's over. But faith says, God's not done. When you fall, get up. When you lose, learn. When you stumble, step again. The comeback might be quiet, but it's still holy. Take one faithful step this week. Make the call. Rebuild the trust. Try again, because your obedience after failure might be the most powerful act of worship you'll ever offer. So here's my challenge to you. Bring your failure to God and hand it over. Think about the last time you fell short. What if that wasn't God's rejection, but his invitation? Pray this with me right now. Lord, I give you my failure. Use it to refine my heart, strengthen my faith, and draw me closer to you. Don't let this break me. Let it build me. Then write down one lesson that failure has taught you, and one way you can use that lesson to help someone else. Because failure is only wasted if you refuse to learn from it or worship God through it. Your story, isn't over because you fail. Sometimes God's greatest work begins right there in the ashes. So let him refine you. Let him rebuild you. And one day, you'll look back and thank him for the fire that made your faith unshakable. If this episode challenged you, you're in the right place. Subscribe to the Courageous Men podcast so you never miss just a day of being challenged and being courageous in how you love the Lord. Let's take action. Let's be courageous.